So number one thing is research the company just a little bit. Make sure you know what they do. Make sure you know just some basics about the company. I'm not saying to spend an hour, a couple hours reviewing the company, but if the interviewer has some general questions about what they do, you have to at least know a few things here and there. So research the company, I would say. That's basically it. Yeah, research the company. That's the number one thing.
Be able to ask questions and kind of know how to answer it in the frame of the company you're interviewing for.
Yeah, I would have some stories prepared. When you're walking to an interview, maybe you have one or two stories that you really like, because one of the key things I'm looking for whenever I'm listening to someone is, can they tell a story? What was the cause of something? What was their response to it? And what was the resolution? And I'm looking for them to tell me a complete story, as opposed to, I did this and then end it. Well, follow through. So have some stories in your back pocket, just in case you get nervous for a question that you didn't expect. Having some just general stories that you know can be shaped to any question asked. Really helpful.
That's smart, yeah. So once they've prepared for the interview, what are some important do's and don'ts of the actual job interview?
The actual job interview. So it would be make sure you go in there dressed nicely. I think that's pretty key. Overdress rather than underdress. If you have your Sunday best, that's what I'd recommend. You never know quite what the person doing the interview is expecting, but it's just safer to always go prepared. During the interview, make sure you're engaged. You're making eye contact. You're responding to the interviewer's questions with as much experience as you can muster. And a lot of it is just general confidence. Walking to the interview, we know you may not have the exact experience we're looking for in terms of whatever job we're searching for, but just having a general good attitude, positive attitude, speaks wonders, and it'll get you on.
Nice. So, as an HR representative who is doing these interviews, what are you looking for in a candidate?
Number one thing is attitude. Are they courteous? Are they being respectful? Thank you, yes sir, or yes ma'am, no ma'am, whatever the case may be, and make sure that they attitude is the number one thing. What else am I looking for? I am looking for general presentation skills. So I told you about nicely dressed. I'm looking for what I always makes people stand out just a little bit is if someone brings in a notebook to an interview. Let's say a lot of times when you interview at large corporations, they're really trying to get the entire interview process done in a day. So you will meet with in Lowe's case, it was the HR manager, then the assistant manager, then the store manager. We're going to try and line those up in a day just to be more efficient. But sometimes the work happens and somebody gets pulled away and we need to call you back. Sometimes things like that just happen. So if they do, that's why I advise you take a notebook. Maybe during the interview, I give you a key tidbit about the next interviewer that you want to write down in between sessions or while you're waiting for the next person. Maybe I send you home with some instructions and you want to make sure you're writing that down. You don't forget any pieces of information. So a simple taking in a notebook is the person engaged. It's just another way to show that you're engaged.
Yeah. And then so after the job interview, after you've done all these interviews, right, and you say you go through a ton of them, what is it that, what's kind of the process afterwards? How are you guys then filtering through all of that to actually offer somebody a job? What is it that you're kind of assessing post-interview?
Normally the interviews are pretty structured. So we have literally a scoring chart behind the scenes. And the scoring chart is usually something to the effect of mentioned before, did they tell a story? Whatever they did, why did they do it, and how did they resolve it? How did they take the initiative to resolve it? And maybe something very basic like, how did you pick a course of study? Whatever the case may be, as long as you're taking us through the steps of your thinking, and we can see that you gave things thought and have made a decision based on whatever research you did, that's huge. So normally it's just, did they tell the complete story? Because a lot of people will just stop at the beginning or just tell us the end and not tell us how they got there. And not only is that not helpful, but it's fairly boring to an interviewer. And so normally you don't get picked if you can't tell a complete story. The scoring process is basically how did they go through with the questions asked? How do they take us through from the beginning to end?
Okay. So really, and it sounds like it's if you could kind of follow somebody, if they had a great attitude, kind of had like a positive interaction, that's going to stand out more than anything else.
Attitude is key. Absolutely.
Okay.
Number one thing.
Cool. All right. So, any last words of wisdom or advice for students who are maybe right now prepping for a job interview or in the process of applying and really trying to land that successful job? Any words of wisdom or any last minute advice?
Sure. I think the word of wisdom is everybody's been in your shoes before. It's going to take probably a few interviews, and you get better over time. You really do. I remember my first interview versus my fifth interview. I got so much better. My stories were just so much smoother. And sometimes you're going to get rejected, but that's okay. You just keep on doing what you're doing, and you'll get something good.
Thanks. I love that. Cool. All right, Owls. Well, the theme of the month was professionalism. So I'm hoping by now you're armed with tips on how to build your resume, searching for jobs in your area, and how to have a successful interview. And that you're already starting to show professionalism at your school. So big thanks to Sam Viegas for being our guest speaker this month. We really appreciate all your insider knowledge. And Owls, we will